The station lights flickered as another long night began. In the endless silence of the mining colony, one human man walked slowly into the tunnels. His name was Daniel. His steps were heavy, his shoulders bent, but his eyes carried something stronger than pain determination. Every morning and every night, Daniel worked to shift back to back. Other workers whispered about him. They said no human could survive that kind of pressure. But Daniel never complained. He simply lowered his head and pushed forward. The air in the tunnels was thin, filled with dust that made breathing hard. Machines groaned, sparks lit the dark corners, and the ground shook with each drill. Most men would take breaks, but Daniel stayed. His hands were cut open, his nails broken, and his back screamed in pain. Yet he never stopped. He knew time was against him. He knew he had someone waiting, far above the tunnels. In a glass tower that overlooked the colony, an alien leader watched him. Her name was Solara. She was tall, with eyes like burning silver, and her presence alone made even soldiers nervous. She had ruled her sector for decades, but something about this human caught her attention. She had seen thousands of workers, but none like Daniel. While others slowed, he worked harder. While others cursed, he stayed silent. Night after night. Her monitors showed the same story. A human father fighting against exhaustion. Solara leaned closer to the screen. Why does he do this? She whispered to herself. It was not greed. He did not ask for more credits. It was not pride. He never boasted of his labor. Something else drove him, something hidden. She decided she would find out. Meanwhile, Daniel left the tunnels after another double shift. His clothes were soaked with sweat, his skin covered in dirt. The walk to his quarters was long and quiet, but he forced himself to stay upright. When he reached his small metal door, he paused, wiped his face, and entered with a tired smile. Inside the tiny room sat his daughter, Lily. She was no more than 7 years old, with bright eyes and messy hair. She looked up from the scrap of paper she was drawing on. "Daddy," she shouted, running to him. Daniel bent down, ignoring the pain in his knees, and hugged her tightly. "I'm home," he whispered. Lily held out her drawing. It was a picture of stars, uneven lines, and glowing dots made with cheap markers. "One day, we will go there," she said proudly. Daniel looked at her picture for a long time, his eyes soft but wet. He stroked her hair and forced his voice steady. "Yes, one day." He set the little food he had brought on the table. It was not much, just bread and some broth, but Lily smiled as if it was a feast. She ate happily while Daniel pretended to eat, hiding the fact that he left most for her. Solara, through her hidden surveillance, saw everything. She watched the man smile even as he swallowed nothing. She saw the child glowing with happiness, unaware of her father's sacrifice. Solara felt something stir inside her chest. It was strange and uncomfortable. Her people never worked like this for a single family member. They valued rank, wealth, and conquest. Yet this human, he bled, starved, and broke his body, all for one child. She could not understand it. The next day, Daniel rose again before dawn. His body shook, his head ached, but he kissed his daughter's forehead gently before leaving. "Sleep, Lily. I'll be back soon," she murmured in her dreams, clutching the drawing of stars. Daniel walked away with quiet strength, unaware that eyes were following his every step. Solara's voice echoed in her private chamber. "No soldier of mine would endure such pain without reason. What does he hide? What secret drives him?" She ordered her aides to gather records, logs, and reports on Daniel. The more she saw, the deeper her confusion grew. He was not a soldier, not a leader, not even a wealthy man. He was just a father. But there was something in him that even her sharp eyes could not explain. That night, as Daniel pushed through another double shift, Solara found herself leaning forward in silence. Sparks flew around him, machines roared, and dust choked the air. Still, he did not stop. Still, he did not break. Solara's heart beat faster as a thought grew in her mind. This was not weakness. This was not desperation. This was something she had never seen before. She narrowed her eyes at the screen, her silver gaze locked on the human father. A whisper escaped her lips, colder than the void outside the station. Why does he fight so hard? And what happens when the galaxy learns the truth? The answer, she knew, would change everything. Solara could not sleep. The image of the human father burned in her mind. She had seen warriors fall in battle, kings beg for power, and merchants trade away their honor. But never had she seen a man destroy himself in silence for no reward. What kind of creature chose pain willingly? She wanted answers, and she wanted them now. Her aides brought her reports from the colony's records. Daniel's name appeared again and again. Shift logs showed he volunteered for extra hours almost every day. Even when others refused dangerous tasks, he stepped forward. When machines broke down or tunnels collapsed, he was there. His work time was double, sometimes triple, that of anyone else. The record said his body should have given up long ago. Yet he survived. Somehow, Solara's silver eyes scanned the data with growing unease. "Why does he keep going?" she murmured. Then her gaze hardened. She ordered her soldiers to follow him discreetly. "Watch him. Record everything. I want no detail missed." Down in the tunnels, Daniel worked like a shadow. His pickaxe struck the rock with steady rhythm, the sound echoing through the dark. Sweat dripped from his face, soaking his clothes. Other miners whispered behind his back. Some mocked him, "The human thinks he's stronger than us." Others shook their heads with pity. He will collapse one day. But Daniel ignored them all. He did not care for their voices. He only cared for the small voice waiting for him at home. Solara's spies followed him through the colony. They saw him refuse extra pay, turning down offers that would tempt any worker. They saw him carry food, not for himself, but for his child. They saw him patch his own wounds with rough cloth instead of visiting the medical bay, saving every credit. And each time he walked into his small room, his face changed. The tired man became a gentle father, his pain hidden behind a smile. Solara replayed the recordings over and over. Her chest tightened as she watched him place bread in his daughter's hands, pretending he was already full. She watched him sit quietly while she told stories about stars, her little hands moving wildly in the air. He nodded, listening carefully, though his eyelids were heavy with exhaustion. She laughed, and he smiled, though his body was breaking. The alien leader clenched her fists. This is not greed. This is not duty. What drives him? Her heart told her the answer, but her mind refused to accept it. In her world, leaders ruled for power. Families were large, but love was thin. To suffer for a single child? It made no sense. It was weakness. Or was it something else? One evening, Solara went further. She commanded the work overseers to assign Daniel the most dangerous shift. The tunnels were unstable, the machines overheated, and even trained soldiers had refused that task. She wanted to see what the human would do when pushed to the very edge. The next morning, Daniel walked into the tunnel without hesitation. The air inside was hotter than fire, the walls trembling as drills carved deep into stone. Sparks flew like stars, and the ground cracked under his boots. Other workers stopped often to wipe sweat or catch their breath. Daniel kept going. His arms shook, blood slid down his palm from fresh cuts, but he refused to slow. Every strike of his pickaxe was like a heartbeat, steady, determined, unbreakable dot. Hours passed. His vision blurred, his knees buckled, but he did not fall. In the shadows, Solara watched from her hidden chamber, her silver eyes wide. She had expected him to collapse, maybe even beg for help. Instead, he pushed forward, stronger than before. He was not fighting for money. He was fighting for something unseen. When the shift ended, Daniel staggered back to his room. He almost fell at the door, but caught himself, straightened his back, and forced a smile before entering. His daughter ran to him as always, holding another drawing. This time, it was a house, small but bright, with two stick figures standing together. "One day, Daddy, we'll live in a place like this," she said proudly. Daniel knelt, ignoring the fire in his muscles. He hugged her tight, whispering, "Yes, Lily, one day." Solara pressed a hand to her chest as she watched. For the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her, something unfamiliar, something almost painful. It was not disgust. It was not anger. It was respect. But with that respect came fear. If this truth spread, if other aliens saw what she was seeing, the galaxy would change. Power would no longer be measured in gold or armies, but in something far more dangerous. Love Solara leaned closer to the screen, her voice trembling, though she never showed weakness. He works for love, not survival. And for the first time in her long rule, Solara felt uncertain. Asterisk. The nights grew colder in the colony, but Daniel's routine never changed. Every morning he awoke before the alarms. Every night he returned after 2 shifts, his body breaking but his smile still there for Lily. For most workers, the cycle of exhaustion meant anger or despair. For Daniel, it meant silence and focus. He carried his burden like armor, never letting his daughter see the weight of his suffering. Solara watched him more closely now. The alien leader no longer treated it as curiosity. It had become obsession. She wanted to know what lived behind his eyes when he pushed against death itself. Why would one man give so much for so little? She ordered her guards to track his personal life beyond the work shifts. At first, they thought the command strange. Why would their proud leader waste resources on a single human laborer? But Solara's tone left no space for questions. Through hidden lenses and quiet steps, the truth unfolded. Daniel lived in a small metal room, barely big enough for 2 people. The walls leaked cold air, the lights flickered weakly, and the bed was nothing more than steel covered with old blankets. Yet inside that bleak space, warmth lived. The warmth of a father and child. Solara's spies captured small details. Lily drawing stars on scraps of paper, her laughter echoing in the narrow room. Daniel sitting beside her, pretending to eat while he saved every bite for her small hands. At night, when Lily slept, Daniel sat alone with cracked fingers and bleeding palms, sewing her torn shoes with pieces of wire, whispering to himself, "Just a little longer. I can do this." When Solara saw these images, something inside her shifted. It was like staring into a world she had never known. Her people did not live this way. In her culture, children were raised in groups, cared for by servants, never by parents themselves. Affection was a tool, never a purpose. But here was a human who broke his body for one small life. It made no sense to her mind, yet her heart could not look away. One night, after another brutal shift, Daniel returned, limping badly. He hit it well, straightening his back before opening the door. Lily ran to him, smiling with a new drawing in her hands. This time she had drawn 2 figures holding hands beneath a giant sun. "That's us," she said proudly. "We're always together." Daniel took the drawing carefully, as if it was made of glass, and kissed her forehead. Solara's eyes burned as she watched. She realized the truth she had been avoiding. Daniel's secret was not hidden in numbers or credits. His secret was simple. He worked not for survival, not for wealth, but for love. A love so deep it could not be broken by hunger, pain, or despair. The alien leader felt her chest tighten. It was almost painful to breathe. For the first time in decades, she felt envy. Not for riches or power, but for the bond between this human father and his daughter. She whispered into the silence of her chamber, "Is this what gives him strength?" But her discovery brought more than aught, brought danger. Word had begun to spread among the colony. Other workers whispered about Daniel and his strange devotion. Some respected him, others mocked him, but all of them spoke his name. If the truth reached beyond the colony, if the galaxy saw what Solara was seeing, everything could change. Families would question rulers. Soldiers would question orders. What power could stand against a love that refused to break? Solara summoned her council in secret. Alien generals and advisors filled the chamber, their voices cold and sharp. She showed them fragments of Daniel's life, the endless hours, the small room. The child who smiled because her father never gave up. The council scoffed. "He wastes his body for a child." One said, "This is weakness." "Humans are foolish," another sneered. But Solara did not sneer. She stared at them, her silver eyes harder than steel. Weakness. Then tell me, why has no soldier of ours shown half his strength? Why has no ruler of ours endured half his pain? If this is weakness, why do I feel fear when I see it? The chamber fell silent. Even her generals could not answer. That night, Solara returned to her private screen. Daniel was sleeping at the table, his head resting beside Lily's little hand, which still held a marker. A half-finished star was on the paper. Father and daughter, side by side, even in exhaustion. Solara pressed her hand against the screen, as if she could reach through. Her whisper trembled, filled with both wonder and dread. He works for love, and love makes him unbreakable. If the galaxy learns this truth, everything we know will fall. Solara could not stop thinking about the human father. Every night she told herself she had learned enough, yet every morning she returned to the monitors, watching him as if he carried the answer to a question no one else could solve. She had seen his truth love gave him strength. But one doubt still lived inside her mind. Was it real strength, or only chance? Did this human have limits, or was he truly unbreakable? That doubt grew into an idea that soon turned into a dangerous plan. Solara summoned the overseers of the mines. Her voice was cold and commanding. "There's a tunnel too unstable for work. Assign him there, alone." The overseers looked at each other in shock. "Leader, that tunnel could collapse. No worker can last there." Solara's silver eyes narrowed. "Send him." And so the order was given. Daniel, unaware of the eyes watching him, accepted the new assignment without hesitation. He did not ask why no one else was chosen. He did not complain. He simply tightened his gloves, picked up his tools, and walked into the unstable darkness. The tunnel groaned like a wounded beast. Rocks shifted above, sending small showers of dust onto Daniel's shoulders. The air was hot and thick, harder to breathe with every step. The machine screamed against the stone, sparks raining like fire. Any other worker would have refused such a task. But Daniel pushed forward, his hands steady, his face calm. Each strike of his tool echoed through the shaking walls. Solara watched from her hidden chamber, her body tense. She wanted to see him fail. She needed to see his limit. But as the hours passed, her heart began to pound. He stumbled. Yes. His arms shook, his breath came rough, yet he refused to stop. He fought not against the rock, but against his own breaking body. At one point, the tunnel shook violently. A crack ripped across the ceiling, stones falling all around him. Daniel shielded his head, blood cutting across his forehead. Any other worker would have run. But Daniel wiped the blood from his eyes and swung harder. He had promised himself he would bring food home. He had promised his daughter he would never let her see fear. Solara gripped the edge of her chair so hard the metal bent beneath her fingers. She whispered, "Why does he not run? Why does he not give up?" Daniel's body was failing. His knees buckled, his vision blurred. But one thought kept him standing. Lily. He saw her face in his mind. Bright eyes waiting at the door, her small hands holding pictures of stars. For her, he could not fall. Not yet. Not ever. At last, the shift ended. Daniel staggered out of the tunnel, clothes torn, blood dripping from his palms. His chest heaved with pain, but he stood tall. Other workers stared in silence. None had ever seen such endurance. Some looked at him with respect, others with fear. But Daniel ignored them all. His steps were heavy, but his heart pulled him forward back to his daughter. When he reached his small room, Lily was waiting by the door, a lantern in her hands. Her smile was wide, her eyes glowing. "Daddy, you're home," she cried. Daniel's lips trembled, but he forced a smile. He bent down, ignoring the fire in his body, and lifted her into his arms. "Yes, little star, I'm home." Inside her chamber, Solara exhaled a breath she had not realized she was holding. She had expected to see a man crushed, broken, begging for mercy. Instead, she had seen something else entirely, something that shook her soul. He was stronger than her soldiers, not because of his muscles, but because of his love. She had pushed him to the edge of death, and still he walked back with a smile for his child. Solara pressed her hand against the cold screen, whispering words she had never spoken before. He is unstoppable. Not because of power, not because of fear, but because of love. And then a new fear entered her heart. If one human could endure like this, what would happen if all humans were driven by such devotion? What would happen if the galaxy saw love not as weakness, but as strength? Her empire would tremble. Her council would crumble. The entire order of power would change. For the first time in her rule, Solara felt her certainty break. She stared at the human father, now holding his daughter close, and whispered to herself, "If love is his weapon, then nothing can defeat him." The colony was never quiet for long. Rumors were faster than fire, carried from tunnel to tunnel, from worker to worker. After Daniel survived the unstable shaft, whispers began to grow. At first it was small talk. "Did you see the human? He didn't run. He should be dead, but he still works." Soon, those whispers turned into stories. And the stories spread like wings across the station. Some said Daniel had no fear of death. Others said his body was made of iron. A few even claimed he was touched by something divine. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. He worked because he loved his child. And slowly, that truth began to leak into the hearts of those who heard. The alien workers, hardened and cold, found themselves unsettled. They had always believed strength came from rank or wealth. Yet this fragile human, weaker in body than most, had shown strength they could not understand. A soldier muttered, "If he can endure for one child, what would he endure for a nation?" Another worker whispered, "If love can make him this strong, what could it do to us?" Solara sat in her tower, watching the rumors spread like cracks across glass. She had tried to keep Daniel's secret hidden, but nothing could silence gossip. Her generals reported unrest. Workers were asking questions. Families were speaking words that had not been spoken for generations. Words of loyalty, of devotion, of love. Solara's silver eyes narrowed as she listened. Fear settled deep in her chest. In the tunnels, Daniel noticed the stairs. Some looked at him with awe, others with suspicion. A few mocked him openly, calling him foolish, a man wasting his life for nothing. But Daniel ignored them. He had no time for pride or anger. Each day he returned to Lily, and each day her smile gave him the strength to rise again. One evening, As he walked home, he found a small bundle left outside his door. Inside was food, real food, not the thin rations he usually carried. Beside it lay a piece of cloth stitched carefully into a scarf for a child. Daniel froze, staring at the gifts. Someone had left them in secret. Someone had heard his story and decided to help. Lily ran out and gasped at the sight. "Daddy, look. We have more." Her laughter filled the cold night. Daniel smiled weakly, his eyes wet. He whispered to himself, "Kindness still lives here." He took the gifts inside, never knowing whose hands had left them. From her tower, Solara saw this moment too. It shook her more than the tunnel collapse had, strength spreading from one heart to another. That was a danger no army could control. If Daniel's story continued to spread, it would not stop at the colony. It would travel beyond the stars, shaking the very order of the galaxy. The council grew restless. One advisor spat with disgust. "This is poison. A single human's foolishness infects our people. They speak of love as if it is power." Another warned, "If the colonies believe in him, they may refuse their duties. They may rebel." Solara listened, her face calm, but inside her chest, conflict raged. She had always ruled with logic, never with emotion. But the human father had shown her something she could not deny. Love gave him power. Love made others follow without command. Love, she realized, was more dangerous than any weapon she had ever built. The breaking point came when soldiers themselves began to whisper. Reports reached Solara's ears of guards speaking Daniel's name with respect. One said, "I have trained for decades, but I could not do what he has done for a child." Another murmured, "Perhaps we serve the wrong masters. Perhaps strength is not what we thought." Seller's hand trembled as she dismissed the reports. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her empire. She knew she should silence Daniel, crush the rumors before they grew larger. Yet each time she thought of it, her mind returned to the image of him holding Lily. His broken hands wrapped around her small frame. To destroy that bond would be to destroy something pure, something the galaxy had never seen. That night, Solara stood before her grand window, staring at the endless stars. The voices of her council echoed in her mind, calling for control, for silence, for punishment. But another voice spoke louder, the quiet, stubborn voice of truth. "If one human father can shake the order of a colony," she whispered, "what will happen when the galaxy learns his secret?" And in that moment, Solara realized the truth was no longer hers to contain. It had already escaped, carried by whispers, carried by hearts. The discovery had begun to spread, and nothing could stop it now. For many nights, Solara told herself she would not act. She could remain hidden, an observer, a ruler watching from her tower. But the whispers would not die. They grew louder, reaching even the ears of her most loyal soldiers. And worse, her own heart refused silence. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw him. The human father, broken yet unbroken, bleeding yet smiling. A man who had nothing yet gave everything. Finally, she could bear it no longer. Solara gave a single order, "Bring him to me." The guards hesitated. "Leader, he is only a worker." Her voice cut the air like a blade. "Bring him." That night, when Daniel returned from another double shift, he found soldiers waiting at his door. Lily clung to his arm, frightened by their sharp armor and cold eyes. "Please, don't hurt my daddy," she whispered. Daniel knelt, kissed her forehead, and whispered back, "It's all right, little star. I'll be back." Then he rose, his back straight, his face calm, and followed the soldiers without a word. They led him through bright corridors he had never walked before, up into the tower where the rulers lived. His boots echoed against the polished floor, his rough clothes marking him as out of place among the cold perfection of alien stone. When the doors opened, he found himself standing in a vast chamber of glass and steel. At the center, on a raised platform, stood Solara, her silver eyes locked on him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence felt heavier than the tunnels he had worked in. At last, Daniel broke it. His voice was rough, but steady. "Why am I here?" Solara studied him carefully. She had prepared speeches, clever words to pierce his mind. But as she looked at his tired face, the words died on her tongue. She asked instead, in a quiet voice she had not used in years, "Why do you keep fighting?" Daniel frowned, confused. "Fighting? I only work." Solara's voice sharpened. "Do not play games with me. No man endures what you have endured for simple wages. I have watched you bleed in silence. I have seen you starve so your child may eat. Tell me." Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated speaking of himself. But he hated lies more. "Because she is all I have. My daughter. If I stop, she suffers. If I fall, she is alone. That is why." The chamber seemed to freeze. Solara's generals, standing at the edges, shifted uncomfortably. To them, his words were madness. To give everything for one small life. It was foolishness. Yet Solara felt her chest tightened. She leaned closer, her silver gaze burning. "Do you not see? You risk your life for one child. You waste your strength on a dream that cannot last. Why?" Daniel lifted his head. His eyes, though tired, burned with a quiet fire. "Because one child is enough. Because she is mine. Because love is worth more than all your power." The words struck Solara harder than any blade. For a moment, her mask slipped. Her breath caught, her hand trembled at her side. She turned her face away, but the damage was done. His answer had pierced the armor she had worn all her life. The generals snarled. One shouted, "Weakness. He speaks of weakness." Another hissed, "End this farce, leader. Crush the worker before he poisons more minds." Solara turned her gaze back to Daniel. But now there was no anger in her eyes, only something deeper, something dangerous, respect. She stepped down from her platform, walking slowly toward him. The guards tensed, ready to strike at her signal. But she raised a hand, stopping them. Standing before him, Solara spoke softly, so only he could hear. "You do not realize what you have done. Your story spreads. Your devotion shakes my people. They do not understand it. They fear it. Even I fear it." Daniel held her gaze, unflinching. "If love frightens you, then you do not know strength at all." For a long moment, the alien leader and the human father stood in silence, two worlds colliding in a single truth. Around them, the generals shifted, uncertain. They had expected commands, not questions. They had expected punishment, not revelation. Solara finally stepped back. Her voice, when it rose again, was steady but changed. "Go. Return to your child." Gasps filled the chamber. No leader had ever dismissed a worker with mercy, let alone respect. Daniel nodded once, turned, and walked out with the same quiet dignity he carried in the tunnels. When the doors closed behind him, Solara whispered into the stillness, "One man. One child." And already the galaxy begins to tremble. The council chamber had never been so full. Leaders from across the colonies gathered beneath the towering glass dome, their voices sharp, their pride heavy. Generals, merchants, and rulers argued about unrest spreading among the workers. The whispers of the human father had reached every ear. Some called him a hero. Others called him a threat. None could ignore him. At the center of it all sat Solara, her silver eyes calm but burning with conflict. She had watched, she had tested, she had confronted. Now there was no running from the truth. She rose from her seat, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the floor. The chamber silenced. "My people," she began, her voice strong and clear. "You know the stories. You have heard the rumors of a human worker who does not break. Some of you laugh at him. Some of you fear him. But all of you wonder, why?" The chamber buzzed with whispers. Solara raised a hand, and silence returned. She motioned toward the giant display at the chamber's center. The lights dimmed, and the screen came alive. They saw Daniel first. Images of him in the tunnels. His body soaked in sweat, his hands torn open, his back bent under crushing labor. They saw him stagger, but never stop, bleed, but never surrender. Then the vision shifted. They saw his small room, the child waiting for him each night, the food he gave away, the drawings she proudly showed him. They saw the scarf left at his door, the kindness of strangers spreading from his sacrifice. Gasps filled the chamber. Some leaned forward, others recoiled. None could look away. Solara's voice echoed. "This man is not strong because of wealth. He is not strong because of power. He is strong because of love. Every drop of blood, every broken bone, every hour of pain. He gave for his daughter. One life, one child. And he endures more than any of us." A merchant scoffed loudly. "Weakness. To suffer for one small thing is madness." But a soldier shouted back, "Madness? Then why does he stand where we would fall? Why does he endure what would kill us?" The chamber erupted in arguments. Some rulers sneered, others shouted in awe. But Solara's voice cut through them all like thunder. "You call it weakness," she said, "yet it makes him unbreakable. You call it foolishness, yet it makes him feared. If one human father can shake your pride, what happens when the galaxy learns what drives his kind?" Silence. Deep, heavy silence. Solara turned back to the screen. Daniel was shown walking into his small room, Lily running into his arms. Her tiny hands clutching his neck as he whispered, "I'm home." That image froze on the screen, brighter than any crown, stronger than any weapon. The chamber held its breath. Solara stepped forward, her silver eyes glowing. "This is what you fear. Not his muscles, not his labor, but his love. A force you cannot measure. A power you cannot rule. If this man suffers for one child, then imagine what a human will do for many. Imagine what their kind will do for each other. That, my counsel, is strength greater than any empire." The words rippled through the chamber like a storm. Some leaders trembled with anger, others with awe. Soldiers exchanged glances, their pride shaken. The idea could not be stopped now. Far away, Daniel knew nothing of this. He sat with Lily, listening to her tell stories about the stars. She laughed, and he smiled, though his body still ached. To him, the galaxy was small, only as wide as the reach of her little hand. He did not know his name was being spoken in the halls of power. He did not know his love had become legend. Solara turned away from the screen, her voice dropping to a whisper that still carried through the chamber. "One man. One child. And yet, he has shown us more strength than all our armies combined." The galaxy will not forget this. The council sat in stunned silence. The revelation was complete. The truth had been spoken, and somewhere deep inside, every leader knew nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk,